Hi. So I'm experimenting with a new scheduling. So it says I'm live, but it's supposed to schedule for posting a little bit later today. So we'll just check it out. If you need the Cliff Notes version, then here it is. Do not ignore, talk yourself out of, do not ignore or talk yourself out of the promptings or inspirations that you get. Um, Also known as those what the fuck moments. Why did that idea pop into my head? Why did I dream about that thing? Why did I suddenly want to visit, research, look into, experience whatever it is that you've suddenly been inspired by? And a lot of times these are really quiet. So you might just have a passing thought. So often what I'm talking about is a passing thought that you have, or something that you overhear that catches your attention in a way that you notice, oh, that just caught my attention, and then very quickly we can move on from it. What I am here to say to you today is that those moments are important, and we don't know in the moment of them presenting themselves to us why they're important or what they're going to be or mean in our life. So again, for those of you who just want the cliff notes, the spark notes, you want in and out, I'm telling you that when you have an idea, when you are inspired by something, do not ignore it. So if something in you tells you to go buy a book or to look something up online or to call a friend, you get the idea of what I'm saying, then follow through on that. Okay. For those of you who like a little story to help you understand or locate yourself within something someone's saying, here's my little example story. About 4 or 5 years ago, I had a dream. And I'm not going to go into details about what I dreamed about or what it is I'm working with. I'm just going to tell you how this might show up for you. So about 4 or 5 years ago, I had a dream. And I woke up with a name that I had never heard before. And it would have been really easy for me not to look into it. And I can't tell you why I actually went and researched this name. I was curious that day. And I have a long-standing dream practice. I've been recording my dreams for many, many years, so that part's not unusual. Getting a name in my dream that I've never heard of and that I almost wasn't sure I had correctly, it just, the way that the words were together, it didn't make any sense at all. It wasn't a language or a dream. It wasn't anything that I was even familiar with. It wasn't like hearing Nancy. It was a combination of letters that I was so curious about. I just went and looked it up just to see if there was something to it. And there was something to it. It is the name of something that belongs to a continent that I've never been to. In the mythology of a creation myth on a continent that I have not yet been to. This name belongs there. So I found that super curious. And then within the next few days or weeks or months, I don't remember exactly, but I had an image in my mind. And at this time, I was very much into watercolors. I had been collecting watercolors, and I had just found this maker who made these really beautiful earth pigments. And I was just having fun with a particular color. And in my mind, I had this image, and so I just painted it. And this is where the details of things they're not precise for me anymore. I just know there was a thread, and I didn't realize that I was following a thread, but I followed it. And this is what I want you to pay attention to for yourselves. None of this made sense. None of this, I mean, when it started, it wasn't even in like a combination of letters that made any sense to me. So this is what it will be for you as well. Things won't make sense. Just follow it. Be playful with it. So I painted this image, and I loved this image, and a lot of it had to do with the richness of the watercolors. But I was still working with this name. I was curious about why this had shown up, and I was also feeling apprehensive about it or resistant to it because it wasn't what I considered my culture. And I think that's important for a lot of us, because a lot of us get stuck in this cultural appropriation conversation that doesn't have very much to do with being directly presented with threads that we are meant to follow, whether or not we belong to that culture in this lifetime or not. I want to say that. And I think that that's becoming a more important conversation to have, because a lot of people are shutting down around this idea that, oh, that doesn't belong to me, that's not mine. We can always learn to practice respect when we are exploring something. And in some ways, it is time for us as a group, humans, to challenge this idea that information only belongs to certain people in certain cultures. Now, I know that's not a popular opinion, and it continues to come up in conversations, so that's not where I plan to spend my energy and attention in this conversation, but it is important. It's important because it stopped me from diving in. And keep in mind, I started this by saying this happened several years ago, 4 to 5 years ago. And the reason why this is still relevant is because I am still following this thread. And I have been, up until recently, still avoidant, because in my mind, it's not my thread to follow. In my mind, that's been trained by an external culture, social etiquette, propriety, what's right and what's wrong, etc., etc., etc. I've been trained to think in this way. However, nobody can argue with me that this information didn't come directly to me. And because of my willingness to follow the threads, I am discovering things that nobody could teach me either. And there are multiple reasons for that have to do with the esoteric, and they have to do with the exoteric, like what's available in the external world. So, I think what I'm wanting to also communicate in this is that when we're receiving information directly from whatever it is that's guiding us in our lives, first of all, keeping our own counsel is very important. It's very valuable. Keeping our own counsel, only discussing these things with people that have proven that they are trustworthy in terms of our most private experiences and thoughts in life. So we need to be practicing discernment as we are learning to receive and relate with information that's coming to us from nonverbal spaces, our internal, inward sense of spiritual guidance, soul guidance, life guidance. So we don't want to be out there sharing what's coming to us in detail with the whole wide world, because the whole wide world's going to have opinions about what we should and should not be doing with that information. And if we are paying attention, we are going to be getting information that has to do with things that we didn't necessarily grow up with. Maybe it's not going to be an entirely different continent, but when we are paying attention to the unseen world, we're going to be getting direction that isn't coming from what we know. That's part of the challenge and invitation of, knock, knock, knock. Are you paying attention? Are you willing to step into something that doesn't feel comfortable, familiar, and well known to you? That's why it's very easy to talk ourselves out of this stuff when it comes to us. Now, going back to this story of mine, and I'm just demonstrating to you how it can show up and how easy it can be to talk ourselves out of something. So I had a dream with this name. I went and looked up this name. It's actually a real thing. It's a real thing. Not very commonly discussed, but there's a little bit of information out there about it that I was able to lock into. I later was inspired to paint this piece. And something in me just had me go back and refer to this dream, and I was able to find a little bit more information that explained to me why this piece that I painted felt so beautiful to me. Okay. Then, I don't know how much longer after that, but this desire for a particular color started coming into my awareness. And it's a color that I just wasn't really fond of or into. And so I just discovered that this thing is actually live. So I don't know how the scheduling works on these lives, but anyway, this is going to show up again at 3. So the name, the painting, and then the color. And the color wasn't a color that I was really fond of, didn't have much of in my life, but all of a sudden my mind is just washed in this color. I want this color in my life. And it's a challenging color to find. So that has been going on. This experience of this thread has been going on for several years now. I'm just thinking, do I want to share this other piece? I will try to share this. This is something that is mostly in my mind as a vision, but I've been able to experience. Oh, this is hard. Okay, so when I moved, when I was planning and preparing for my move out of state, I had this image in my mind of the backyard of this place that I was moving to. Now, I hadn't seen the backyard, and the image in my mind and what was actually there it was not the same experience. But specifically in my mind, I imagined an altar space. I imagined an altar space, and there was a particular vessel that I wanted to have in this altar space. Now, this is another reason why it's really important and valuable to keep your own counsel when you're in your spiritual work, when you're in your spirit process. Because it's hard to explain things to some people, and what's going on for you internally is not necessarily for other people, especially while we're going through it. Again, when we put our stuff outside into the external world, we allow the external world to come in and just lay their ideas and opinions on things. So, and that can be very confusing, because then it's not a direct one-to-one with us and source. It's our experience of things and then being interpreted through the collective. So I'm sharing these pieces of my experience with you just so that you can understand like the progression, like how this might show up for you and how you can follow it and how long it may take before things start making sense to you. So I had an image. I wanted to set up an altar space in the backyard of this place. It just felt like something I wanted to do. And there was a very particular type of vessel. And I learned that referring back to this name that landed in my mind, this type of container is specifically related to this name. So this archetype that I dreamt about just by name has been talking to me, even though I have been uncomfortable talking back, even though I felt like it wasn't mine to be in relationship with. It has continued to talk with me over the years. I think I might be going into my 5th year being in a slow conversation with this archetype. And one of the reasons why it's coming up in this conversation with you is because it's coming back again in a very strong way. And I'm starting to understand, like, you guys can't see, like, I talk with my hands. I'm starting to understand some of the pieces that have been, hey, Nakaya, like, would you like to be in conversation with me? Would you like to play? Would you like to explore this path? Has been very patient with me over the years as I have developed some level of comfort with exploring something that feels very natural. Like, when I understand the story of this thing, I'm like, well, I mean, immediately I understood in me, like, why this archetype would show up for me, because it comes from another land. My trained academic societal mind is like, you can't do that. That's not for you. So I've had to, like, re-educate myself about the truth of that for me. And this thread that I'm following, it's not making sense to me. I can't tell you what it means, but I'm beginning to understand in a body sense the validity of this conversation that I'm having with spirit. I am beginning to experience in a bodily sense, in a somatic, physical way, inwardly, why this messenger keeps coming to me. And I'm going to continue to follow it. And I may not have the story, I may not have like a full paragraph of whatever the spirit story communication is until another 5 or 10 years down the road. And I'm okay with that. So for you, we don't know why we're inspired to pursue something or to explore something. This could be a type of class or a type of dance, or maybe you're inspired to start learning to sew or to make something, or to travel to a city nearby, or to learn a new language. We don't know why we're being called to these things until much later in life, or maybe it could be a couple of weeks down the road. You might be inspired to study a language because a few years from now you might meet someone that you decide to love who speaks this language, or maybe you travel to a place, or maybe you're invited to teach in a place and that language skill becomes immensely helpful. Or maybe you're inspired to learn to make something, to create something. And maybe the idea of learning to do that thing is daunting, but if that inspiration has come to you, my encouragement, my request to you is follow it, because it's showing up for purpose. It is showing up for a purpose. And part of living creatively and courageously is answering these calls that don't have an answer. Okay? So what I mean by that is, we're called, we hear or see the inspiration or we feel it, but we don't have any kind of story about why it's showing up in our life. Our business is not the story. Our business is in following the call. It's a call and response. The spiritual practice and living from an internal intelligence, it's call and response. And we don't get the entire response all at once. We get the call, we respond. And each time we respond and show up and learn a new, and like the next step of that invitation, we get a little bit more of the puzzle to work with. We're not going to see the whole big picture at that moment of initial inspiration. And we're not going to see the whole big picture as we're doing the work of learning the thing that we've been invited to be in relationship with, which is what a lot of this inspiration and download and upload and inload, and I just heard somebody recently call it a reload. Like, we are not going to get all of the information at once. Some people would say that takes all the fun out of it. I might add, like, what's the point of getting the entire story all at once when our life is about living in the story and living as the story and living the story? So don't get caught up in, I don't know what this means. Like, yeah, of course you don't know what it means. You were just handed an invitation. When you're handed an invitation to a party or a wedding or, you know, whatever we get invited to these days, like old school written invitations, we have an idea. We at least have an idea with an invitation. Oh, it's a birthday party, so there's probably going to be a cake or some sort of celebratory thing. But we don't know all of the details of who we're going to meet, the conversations that we're going to have, things like that. With an invitation from Spirit, a lot of times we don't even know what we're being invited to. And that's pretty fucking cool. At this point in my life, I can say, looking back on my life and the invitations that I have turned down and then got to see what it was I turned down, and the invitations that I accepted and am still in the process of being in the party, experiencing the ceremony. I don't know what other kind of invitations we get. So, our world is in a death and gestation and rebirthing period all at once right now. Humanity all over the planet are in different stages of this. Some people have been through their death and their liminal phase, and now they're coming into the phoenix rebirth stage. And some people are just stepping into the death phase and are losing a lot of identity and security and et cetera, et cetera. This is what I mean by death. The liminal stage is that in between, I don't know why I am where I am. And then the rebirth is where we start to, like, we may be starting to regather ourselves, and we're preparing to step into a new version of ourselves, a new expression of our life, a new experience of ourselves and our lives. We have recreated the space around us and within us most importantly, and we're stepping out in a new expression. All over the planet, humanity is in different stages of this cycle. I am one of the voices saying having a dedicated devotional practice to our internal experience of ourselves, our internal knowing, the work that we need to do to unlearn and relearn. I don't even like those words, but the work that we need to do to learn ourselves and be fortified in our self-understanding, and then move in the world from that place. I'm one of those voices that say that our commitment to knowing ourselves from the inside out, independent of the external world's opinions about what it is to be, having that skill set strengthened within yourself is going to be your lifeline, your raft, moving forward into these currents of change. We cannot escape the currents of change, but we can manage somewhat how internally impacted we are by what's going on in the external world. So, part of that for a lot of us, I would say for all of us, every single one of us, whether we consider ourselves a spiritual being or not, is receiving information about where to head in life, our next steps. Every single one of us. We all have an opportunity to learn to listen more deeply and to respond. I'm looking for the word. I'm going to say respond with more dedication. That's not quite what it is, but it's not just a response. It's committing to being response-able, willing to respond to the direction that we are receiving as an individual in our life. And it takes a commitment, because you're not going to understand. There's going to be things that are incredibly challenging. If you've not ever been in this place of living your life by your inner directive, you will be tested. You will be asked to make choices that are challenging, whatever that means for you. It means so many different things. It will show up so differently for all of us. So I can't say what that is for you. What I'm wanting to say is there are tools available to you from all kinds of traditions that you can access to help you move through this. I am offering a set of tools when I come on to these conversations. I'm not just coming here to talk about like nonsense stuff. These are actual tools that I use to navigate my life, and my life is very unscripted as far as I can tell. Something out there may have the script, but as far as I can tell, I'm not following the rules. And there are more and more and more of us who are finding that we have to live our lives outside of the prescribed rules that we've either been trying to live by or been in some anguish and anxiety because we've never been able to live by them. We are in times where the rules are being questioned, they're being challenged, they're being dissolved, things are changing. And if you don't understand that things are changing in deep, 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 deep ways, it's time to start paying attention to that possibility in your life. For those of you who do understand that the experience of this world is changing, that is a fact. You are not imagining it. It is changing on so many layers and levels. That's real. And if you're experiencing it and you haven't had someone validate and confirm this for you, yes, the world is changing. Life as we know it is changing. And it's obvious in all of our social structures. It's very obvious. We can see that happening in all of our social structures. Understand that our social structures are a reflection and an outward expression of our internal structures. I'll say that for people who don't want to relate with spirit, like a spiritual beingness within humanity. But I live my life from a spiritual beingness in humanity. I live my life from the idea that I am, and many of us are, spiritual beings having this human experience, in this human experience. And so our outward, what we're witnessing externally is the creation of what we are internally. And that means a lot of things. That's not a conversation for this video, and I don't have all of those answers either. Something for you to explore and contemplate, spend time with on your own. I am going to say that I do understand that there's a lot of reflections out there in the world, a lot of versions of a reality. Choose your own adventures. This is actually something that's been coming up a lot in my conversations with people, this idea of choosing your own adventure. And I'm seeing it in a lot of games, and apparently there's shows, like streaming shows that are playing with this like in real time, which sounds really cool. But when I hear people talk about it, I'm seeing the reflection in the social culture around this internal process that many of us are in of choosing our own adventure. Like there's what culture tells us we are able to experience and what's right to experience. And then there's this idea of what we are being directed to experience from the inside out. And that's what I am interested in supporting people with. Learning how to really trust is the word coming up, although it's not always trust that I experience. I get challenged by that a lot, and that's where that devotion and commitment too comes in. So it's a combination of things, and I speak in this way because I want people to understand that for me, in the way that I teach, there are a variety of ways to come at a particular challenge or invitation. I don't do things always in one direction. There are definitely people out there who do, and if you need help learning how to do this for yourself and you need one way to do it, go look for the folks who teach that one way, because that's also a valid way to do it. I come at things from multiple directions because sometimes my faith in something, it gets challenged, but I need to keep moving in the direction. So I'm going to move over and take this perspective on my situation. I use multiple, it's like a kaleidoscope, working with the kaleidoscope. So if you're still with me on this, don't get stuck in having to approach yourself from one direction. Start with, am I willing to commit to my experience as a spiritual being, learning to live from an inwardly directed place in my life? Am I willing to listen to the inspirations and the guidance that I'm getting directly? Am I willing to respond to it? Am I willing to commit to it? I have a Charlie horse in my foot, and that does not feel good. Okay, so when something shows up in your dreams, when you hear something in conversation and it sparks, it gets your attention, it makes you want to know more. If you meet somebody and you have a few minutes to sit down and follow up on that connection, it doesn't have to be a connection that lasts past that moment. That's something I want to talk about in another conversation. This idea that we have to get stuck on things that inspire us or people that inspire us. Because let's say you wake up with an idea in mind and you take that first step towards the idea. That first step may lead you in a different direction, but that idea, that initial invitation that you responded to, was just meant to get you to take action and start moving. So that's getting a little bit off track. I really want you to follow through on your inspirations, on your promptings. A lot of you, you're inspired or motivated to take a break from social media. You're not going to miss out on information. That can actually open you up to more direct information because there's less external noise coming in and taking up space in your system. So your inspirations are your inspirations, and there's a reason why they are being delivered to you. Pay attention to them and give them some of your energy and see where they lead you. That's what I want you to do. Okay, I'm going to sign off here. Hope you guys have a great Wednesday, and I'll see you again.